Item 10B, adopt a resolution authorizing the sale of pension obligation bonds to refinance outstanding fund obligations of the city to the California Public Employees Retirement System, approving the form of related financing documents and approving official actions.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. So I figured I would tackle this presentation by answering three questions that I think are important for everybody here to understand with regards to this financing, this proposed financing. So the first question that I will ask and answer for you is really to talk about what is a side fund, because this refinancing, these pension obligation bonds that are before you this evening, are an issuance to refund a debt that currently exists between the city and the CalPERS agency. So a side fund, just to go back, in 2003, CalPERS merged many of the smaller units that had less than 100 employees into risk pools. So at that point in time, they were independent. They each had their own rates. And in an attempt to reduce the volatility of rates, they took a lot of the smaller plans of less than 100 employees and put them into risk pools. And so that included both the police and fire units for the city. They were merged into a safety pool with other agencies. At that time, when they went into that pool, there was an unfunded liability at that point in time in 2003 that basically said, you've put in this much money to the system. This is the difference between what has been put in and what you actuarially has been determined that you owe to CalPERS to fund your retirement obligations at this point in time. So a side fund was created at that point in time to be paid by the city over a term of 25 years. So this is going back to 2003. That side fund has been paid by the city, and it is paid through current contribution rates that we pay for our safety employees. So right now we pay in excess of 36.6% for our safety employees to PERS. And of that 36%, 11.8% of that is to pay the side fund obligation. So this is a number that we do pay as part of our rates, and we will continue to pay for the next 14 years through June 2027. So it's a real dollar amount that we know and that we will continue to pay. In addition, PERS charges a discount rate, basically charges us interest on that liability at a rate of 7.5%. Now that rate was recently decreased from 7.75% earlier this year, so they reviewed their investments and decided that a decrease in that rate was the proper way to proceed. And so right now it's 7.5%. This is again a fixed dollar amount, a fixed percentage. Now, what could happen, a possibility is that PERS could decide, right now we're paying 7.5%, PERS could decide to revisit their investment assumptions, and they could possibly lower the rate down another 25, another notch to 7.25 or something. So it is a possibility that PERS could at some point in the future determine to reduce that investment rate. But however, at this point in time, we're using 7.5% as the basis of our calculations. So the next question I wanted to ask and answer is really, what is a pension obligation bond? And I think you hear a lot about them in the media. They get a bad rap because they can be structured in many different ways. Many agencies, or some agencies, have issued pension obligation bonds to address a cash flow issue that they're having. They can't fund their pensions or current pension costs. They have a budget shortfall. The answer might be issuing pension obligation bonds. That's not what this is. This isn't we're not looking to issue pension obligation bonds because of any of those types of issues. We are really looking at doing this simply because the finances are telling us that this is what makes sense, again, because we're paying the 7.5% interest rate, and we think in the market we could get significantly lower interest rates, and therefore pay this side fund off at PERS and be done with it and reduce our current retirement rates. So the next section, I'm going to walk through basically the terms of the issuance. As you know, we've been evaluating pension obligation bonds. I think we first spoke to the City Council about this back in June during the budget study sessions, and then proceeded with a judicial validation action in late June, which was completed on September 19th. The city's financing team, who some of them are here in the audience this evening, includes Fieldman Rollap and Associates, who has been serving as the city's financial advisor, Jones Hall as bond counsel, and Prager Sealing Company as the city's underwriter, in working with the city, have determined that the market conditions right now are such, they're extremely favorable, and it makes sense for us to consider moving forward in 2012 with the issuance of pension obligation bonds. These favorable market conditions are obviously the low interest rates that everybody has seen, as well as a recent issuance, similar issuance by the town of Carmel, similar issuance of a smaller dollar amount but to pay off a side fund that was well received by the market. So the early estimates at this point in time indicate that the city would likely be able to obtain an interest rate of somewhere around 4%. So that would be a decrease from 7.5% to 4%. And based on our current side fund of $12.6 million would represent about a 20% net present value savings over the term of the 14 years to the city. In the amount of the issuance would be, at this point in time, it's still an estimate as we're waiting for our final payoff number from PERS. However, the par amount would be just over $13 million and would include all the cost of issuance. So that would include the fees for the bond counsel, financial advisor, and all the underwriting fees, which would be just about $300,000. So should the City Council decide to move forward with the issuance of these bonds, adoption of the resolution that is before you this evening will authorize the issuance of the bonds, and it will also approve, there's a number of attachments that were a part of the packet, including the preliminary official statement, which is the document that presents a description of the city and its finances and the revenue sources, as well as risk factors that bondholders or potential bond investors should be aware of. And this is the document that is circulated at the time of sale to investors. There's an indenture of trust agreement, and this is the agreement that exists between the city and its trustee, and in this case that would be Union Bank, that basically highlights the rules and responsibilities of each party, and for the city includes our requirement to make the bond payments annually, as well as to include those bond payments, the debt service, in our budget. Finally, the last document is the bond purchase agreement. So this is the agreement that it would exist between the city and the underwriter, which is Prager Sealing Company, to basically purchase, accept delivery, and pay for the bonds. And it also includes the underwriter's compensation of not to exceed 1%, which is included in those issuance costs that I talked about earlier. The resolution also provides assurance that the bonds will not be issued if market conditions were to change, interest rates were to go up. It provides the assurance that unless the net present value savings is in excess of 5%, we would not issue the bonds. So it assures a minimum savings of 5%. And as I indicated earlier, early estimates say that it could be in excess of 20%. However, we won't know until we get to the market and also when we get our final credit rating. So assuming City Council approval of these items, next steps would be to get the credit rating. The city provided a presentation to Standard & Poor's last week and is awaiting a rating sometime later this week. And once we have the rating, then the underwriter can work towards identifying potential investors and have an order period. So we would hope to enter the market on or before December 20th. And finally, we would close the bonds and pay off the current side fund with PERS on December 28th, which is before the end of the year. And at that time of payoff, CalPERS would therefore reduce our PERS rate for safety members going forward by an amount of roughly 11.8% currently. The city's bond payments going forward, should we do this, would come from the city's general fund. It's a debt of the general fund, and it would be offset, while the debt service would be paid from the general fund, it would be offset by a reduction in the general fund retirement costs as a result of reducing the rate for police and fire members. So that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, and also we have members of the financing team here to answer questions as well.
Thank you, Kim. Any questions for the Finance Director? Any action by the Council?
I'll introduce the resolution.
Vice Mayor O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye.